You stand on the edge of an empire so vast that its rhythms feel eternal. A kingdom that calls itself the middle of the world. The Qing dynasty stretches across mountains and deserts, across rivers wide as seas, across cities swollen with palaces and tea houses and crowded markets. Its mandarins write in flowing brushstrokes, its emperors sit on dragon thrones beneath golden roofs, its scholars sip ink-dark tea while whispering poetry copied from memory. For centuries, China has been the center, and the rest of the world has orbited around it like moths around a lantern. Foreign kings send envoys bowing low. Merchants travel months to glimpse its silks, its porcelains, its teas. But at the heart of this proud empire lies a hunger, a silent current running beneath all the pomp, and that hunger is for silver. Before you drift off, do me a small favor and tap the like button and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. It is not luxury or greed that binds China to silver, but law itself. Taxes are collected not in rice or grain, but in solid silver coins, real weight of metal. Every farmer, every craftsman, every family must scrape together enough silver to pay the officials who come knocking each year. And so silver becomes more than money, it becomes survival. It is hidden in jars under beds, buried in fields sewn into hems of robes. Fathers work themselves to exhaustion to hoard it. Mothers sell jewelry to secure it. Sons wander city streets searching for ways to earn it. Silver flows into households like blood into veins, and without it, the body of the empire cannot live. But China does not mine enough silver on its own. Its soil yields rice and tea, silk and porcelain, jade and lacquer, but not nearly enough of the pale metal demanded by its own bureaucracy. To keep the empire breathing, it must pull silver in from beyond its borders, and so it does, like a tide drawing in. Spanish galleons cross oceans heavy with silver from Mexico and Peru. Portuguese traders shuttle it from Manila across the Pacific. British and Dutch merchants haul it in their holds, their own goods unwanted, their coins more valuable than their fabrics. Each year the tide of silver rises higher, pouring into Canton, the single port where foreign ships are allowed to dock. The empire believes this proves its superiority, that the outside world bends before its markets, offering precious metal just for the privilege of sipping its tea. But tides have a way of turning, and what rises can also recede. The emperor and his court do not see the fragility. They see chests of silver stacked high in storehouses, weigh taxes in shimmering ingots, and believe the flow will never stop. They measure their wealth not in armies or cannons but in metal that arrives on ships with foreign flags. The mandarins write reports praising the trade system, praising the strict control of Canton, praising the way foreigners are forced to kneel and beg for a chance to buy silk and porcelain. They do not see the imbalance hidden in the exchange. For every chest of silver that comes in, a dependency deepens. For every ingot that clinks onto the treasury's scales, the empire becomes more vulnerable to the hands that deliver it. Silver is supposed to be eternal, but even eternity cracks. In villages, taxes grow heavier. The demand for silver more merciless. Families sell rice at poor prices to scrape together enough coin, sell daughters into servitude, watch sons flee to cities in desperation. The empire itself begins to feed on its people, and the weight of the silver tax presses into the soil like a buried blade. Yet the mandarins cling to it, unwilling to change, blind to the way it twists households into ruin. What matters is that the silver continues to arrive, that Canton's warehouses remain full, that the illusion of strength remains unbroken. And arrive it does. Year after year, ships unfurl their sails, ride the monsoon winds, drop anchor in the Pearl River Delta. They disgorge chests of silver that clatter on the docks, hoisted by sweating porters, watched by sharp-eyed officials. The foreigners know their place. They are penned into the 13 factories, the strip of warehouses allotted to them in Canton, unable to travel inland, unable to meet officials except under strict ceremony. They bow, they barter, they accept insult with stiff smiles, because they know that whatever the humiliation, the trade is worth it. China has what they need, and for now, the price is silver. Inside tea houses, merchants brew leaves as green as jade, pour cups as clear as morning dew, and taste profit with every sip. Porcelain kilns blaze, their workers painting blue dragons on white bowls destined for European dining tables. Silkworms spin thread that will wrap itself around foreign nobility, shining in candle-lit ballrooms thousands of miles away. All of it leaves China in bales and crates, and all of it returns as silver, filling the coffers, gleaming like captured moonlight. The empire believes itself untouchable, the foreign world forever dependent, and in those days it almost seems true. But history moves silently, like a current under still water. The British grow restless as their silver drains away, as chests empty faster than they can be filled. Their warehouses at home overflow with cotton cloth, iron tools, trinkets of industry. But in Canton these things are dismissed with a sneer. China will take only silver, and silver grows scarce. In London, merchants mutter, politicians scheme, and bankers count dwindling reserves with tight jaws. What was once a profitable trade is now a hemorrhage, and when great empires bleed, they do not simply let themselves die. They look for ways to cut back. They look for ways to strike. The Qing dynasty does not see this yet. It sees only the glitter of silver, not the danger hidden in dependence. It believes its walls are strong, its fleet sufficient, its officials incorruptible. It believes its system eternal, its people obedient, its world the center. But you stand in Canton and watch the ships anchor, and you sense it. The tide of silver that once rose so high is beginning to ebb. You can hear the sucking of water pulling back from the shore, leaving mud and wreckage behind. You can smell the change in the air, sharp as storm clouds over the sea. The empire has tied its survival to silver, and silver is about to betray it. The story begins here, not with gunboats and cannons, but with coins glinting in the sun, with farmers scraping at soil for taxes, with merchants hauling chests onto docks. The story begins with silver, flowing like blood into the body of an empire that believes itself eternal. But blood can be poisoned, and tides can turn, and the very metal that once gave life to the Qing dynasty will open its veins to ruin. The leaves look harmless, thin, curled, fragile as paper. Yet when they are dropped into boiling water, they release a power that has already reshaped the world. In China, tea is an old friend sipped in scholars' studios, brewed in roadside stalls, poured in porcelain cups for emperors and farmers alike. But across the sea, in Britain, tea has become something more than a drink. It is ritual. It is addiction. It is identity. And it is draining Britain dry. By the late 18th century, the British Empire has stretched its red hand across oceans, planted its flag in India, Jamaica, Canada, Africa. But its heart beats to the rhythm of tea. Mornings in London begin with kettles whistling, afternoons pause for teacups clinking, evenings end with servants setting pots beside hearths. Tea cuts through every class, every street. The dock worker sips it as strength, the noblewoman as fashion, the factory owner as habit. With sugar spooned in from Caribbean plantations and porcelain cups imported from Jingdesen, Each sip tastes of empire. Yet the leaves themselves come from one place only, China, and China demands silver. The British East India Company, swollen with power, finds itself trapped in an irony too bitter for words. It commands armies in India, conquers ports across Asia, bribes kings, topples governments. Yet in Canton, its merchants must bow before Qing officials, pay duties, accept humiliation, and hand over silver in mountains just to bring home the leaves their country craves. Every chest of tea shipped from Canton is another chest of silver emptied in London. The company watches its reserves sink like sand through an hourglass. By 1800, the flow is catastrophic, millions of pounds of silver pouring into China, vanishing into the empire's treasury, never to return. Britain, for all its guns and ships, is being bled dry by a leaf. The British government grows frantic. Politicians thunder in Parliament about the trade imbalance. Pamphlets circulate in London, warning of financial collapse if the silver drain continues. Bankers whisper of crises, of reserves dwindling, of coins disappearing from circulation, but no one can suggest the obvious solution: to stop drinking tea. It is unthinkable. To deny Britain its tea is to deny Britain itself. Addiction has become national policy, and so eyes turn toward India, toward Bengal, toward the opium poppies blooming in fields like red wounds against the soil. In smoky boardrooms, East India Company officials sketch a plan. If China will not buy British goods, then China will be made to buy British poison. Opium pressed into bricks, shipped secretly into Canton, traded for silver that will flow not into China's treasury, but back into British vaults. The plan is elegant in its cruelty, inevitable in its greed. Opium will be the counterweight to tea, a nation's addiction balanced against another's, a leaf for a flower, a habit for a hunger. The first shipments trickle in under cover of darkness, hidden in cargoes of cotton and spices. Chinese smugglers meet them at coastal inlets, boats rocking in moonlight as crates are transferred in silence. At first it is small, almost invisible against the tide of silver still flowing in. But word spreads quickly. The opium is powerful, numbing, intoxicating. Merchants crave it, officials dabble in it, soldiers find courage in its smoke. Pipes appear in tea houses, in gambling dens, in the very rooms where taxes are counted in silver coins. What was once secret becomes epidemic. Britain smiles coldly as the tide shifts. Silver once poured into China like rain into rivers. Now it begins to pour out again, streaming back toward Calcutta, toward London, toward the waiting coffers of the company. The balance tilts. The East India Company's ledgers glow with profit. Parliament relaxes. The bankers breathe easier. The addiction of Britain has found its answer in the addiction of China. Tea for opium, silver for silver. A trade so profitable, it will drown two empires at once. But in Beijing, the emperor remains blind. Reports filter up from Canton of strange smoke drifting through villages, of farmers too dazed to plant their fields, of sons selling heirlooms to feed their hunger. Mandarins whisper of silver leaking out of the treasury, of corruption spreading like rot through the bones of the empire. But the court is insulated by ritual and arrogance. Officials dismiss the stories as exaggerations, assure the throne that the system is still strong, that the foreigners are still contained. They do not yet see that silver, the empire's lifeblood, has begun to seep away, drawn back out through pipes and smugglers and British ships, waiting just beyond the horizon. You can almost see it, a British tea table in London, the porcelain cups delicate, the sugar glittering, the steam rising fragrant. Across the world, in a Canton alley, a man lies slumped over a pipe, his silver gone, his eyes clouded. Between them stretches an invisible cord, silver coins travelling from his hand to the company's vault, from his weakness to Britain's strength. Each sip of tea in London is bought with another ruin in China. Each puff of opium smoke in Canton fuels another kettle in Britain. The balance has shifted, and it is not just numbers in ledgers, it is the tilt of empires. China, once the dragon that demanded silver tribute from the world, is beginning to starve on its own hunger. Britain, once bled white by its tea addiction, is filling its veins again with silver stolen by poison. The stage is set. The tide of silver has turned, and with it the fate of China begins to unravel. The embassy begins not with soldiers, but with gifts. Crates unloaded from ships in Tianjin, carried on shoulders and carts toward Beijing. Each box filled with treasures meant to dazzle a dragon throne. Telescopes of polished brass, clocks that sing like birds, muskets with barrels etched in steel, velvet carpets, carriages with wheels that whisper over cobblestones. They are the pride of Britain's factories, the fruit of an industrial revolution already humming like fire, and they are wrapped not in velvet alone, but in pride, the belief that such wonders will open China's gates. Lord George Macartney leads the procession, a man heavy with duty, his wig powdered white, his mind rehearsing every bow, every phrase. It is 1793, and he carries more than gifts. He carries Britain's hunger. The East India Company's coffers sag under the weight of tea, silver pouring out like blood from a wound. London demands relief. The king himself demands new rules, and Macartney is chosen to kneel, or to stand, before the Son of Heaven. The road to the Forbidden City is long and staged with ritual. Every village they pass sends delegations with banners and drums, not to welcome but to watch. Chinese officials ride alongside, their faces unreadable, their notes sharp. Macartney's party lodges in guest houses where the walls seem to listen. The gifts are unpacked, inspected, inventoried. What was meant to be splendor feels suddenly like contraband, as if the empire is amused by the West's desperation. When they arrive at the Forbidden City, the scale of it dwarfs even the most ambitious European palace. Golden roofs stretch to the horizon, courtyards wide enough to swallow armies, gates carved with dragons that seem to move when clouds pass. The smell of incense saturates the air, thick enough to choke, sweet enough to lull, and at the center, seated on a throne beneath a canopy of embroidered silk, is the Qianlong Emperor. His face is old, his gaze sharp, his voice still resonant with the confidence of a dynasty that calls itself eternal. Here, ritual is everything. Foreign envoys are expected to kowtow, to kneel and touch their foreheads to the ground 9 times, acknowledging the emperor not as equal, but as overlord. For Macartney, the choice is unbearable. To kowtow is to humiliate Britain. To admit subservience, to refuse, is to risk insult so grave it could collapse the entire mission. He bows, but not fully. He kneels, but not completely. He offers compromise where no compromise is recognized. To the Qing court, it is arrogance. To Britain, it is pride. To history, it is futility. The gifts are presented. The clocks tick. The telescopes gleam. The muskets fire with a crack that echoes in courtyards. The emperor glances at them with disinterest. China has its own wonders, its own clocks, its own weapons. What are these baubles compared to the harmony of an empire that has stood for centuries? He accepts them as tribute, not as trade, and in doing so reduces Britain's offerings to the same category as trinkets from Central Asia or shells from Pacific islands. Britain has come to bargain, but China declares it has nothing to bargain for. Macartney requests ports, requests embassies, requests the right to send merchants deeper into China's body. The emperor listens, then writes a letter so cold it freezes the air between them. The Son of Heaven declares that China has no need of foreign goods, that the empire is self-sufficient, that its people want for nothing. Foreigners may bring silver if they wish to purchase tea and silk, but China will not stoop to accept their inferior wares. He sends Macartney home with words sharp as swords. We possess all things. I set no value on objects strange or ingenious, and I have no use for your country's manufactures. The embassy returns to London with humiliation packed heavier than the gifts. Macartney has failed. China remains closed. The silver continues to bleed. In Britain, outrage simmers. The arrogance of the emperor becomes a story retold in Parliament, in taverns, in merchant halls. The Chinese, they say, see us as barbarians, unworthy of equal standing. Very well. If gifts are mocked and words dismissed, then ships will speak instead. But for now, in 1793, the powder has not yet been lit. The embassy leaves behind echoes of its failure, and in Beijing the emperor sits on his throne, satisfied that he has put foreigners in their place. He does not know that within 50 years, foreign cannon will shatter the very walls of his empire. He does not know that by dismissing Britain's desperation, he has guaranteed that Britain will turn to weapons sharper than telescopes, deadlier than clocks. The refusal is not merely a rejection, it is a spark, and sparks, left untended, grow into fire. You can almost see Macartney leaving the Forbidden City, his carriages creaking, his face pale beneath powder. He has looked at the dragon throne and found no purchase, no negotiation, no compromise. Behind him the incense still burns, the mandarins still smile thinly, the courtyards still stretch in golden silence. Ahead of him lies a voyage home, a report to a king, and the knowledge that the empire he sought to bend will not bend until it is broken. Canton breathes like no other city in the empire. It is a throat through which the world must pass, a narrow opening, crowded, noisy, dazzling, and suffocating. By imperial decree, it is the only place where foreigners may trade, the single port through which the riches of China may trickle outward and the silver of the world may pour inward. To stand on its docks in the late 18th and early 19th centuries is to feel history itself heaving under your feet. The air is thick with smells that do not belong together. Spices from Java, whale oil from Nantucket, tobacco from Virginia, sandalwood from the Pacific Islands, mingling with the sharper scents of incense, sweat, and river mud. Ships of every flag anchor in the Pearl River, their masts bristling like forests, their holds heavy with goods, their captains restless. The river is crowded with sampans, small craft piloted by locals who weave expertly between hulking foreign vessels, carrying passengers, smugglers, servants, spies. The warehouses, the 13 factories, stand in a row, long and narrow, painted in bright colors, each one representing a different nation. Behind their walls, fortunes are made and lost in the time it takes for a pen to scratch across paper. Foreigners live here like prisoners gilded in silver. They cannot bring their wives, cannot wander beyond the walls, cannot learn the language freely, cannot step foot outside without permission. The factories are their entire world, their golden ghetto, lined with billiard tables, stocked with liquor, decorated with flags meant to remind them of home. Some drown in boredom, others in drink, others in debts written in opium smoke. They are watched constantly, managed by the Kohong, the guild of Chinese merchants authorized to deal with them. The Kohong men are middlemen, interpreters, negotiators, and debt collectors all at once, their power vast, their fortunes staggering. Among them rises one figure whose wealth eclipses kings, Hao Kuo, known in Chinese as Wu Bingjian. He becomes the richest man in the world, richer even than emperors if measured in silver alone. His fortune comes not from conquest, but from cleverness, from lending to foreigners at interest, from supplying tea and silk, from skimming the endless river of silver that flows through Canton. His hand stretches far beyond the Pearl River. American merchants borrow from him to build their new republic's trade. European companies rely on his credit when their own treasuries run thin. To deal with Hao Kuo is to touch the pulse of global commerce. He sits in his courtyard, in robes embroidered with gold, sipping tea poured into porcelain cups finer than glass, and his pen decides the fate of nations. Canton at night glows with lanterns, the hum of voices rising from tea houses, where merchants and officials whisper over contracts, from gambling dens, where silver clinks on tables, from brothels where laughter masks despair. Music drifts from gardens where bamboo bends in the moonlight, while behind closed doors smugglers negotiate under candlelight. Opium already trickles through these alleys, but its flood has not yet come. For now Canton is a city of silver, its veins swollen, its heartbeat strong. But even in its golden age, cracks show. The foreign merchants chafe at restrictions, resent the bribes demanded, hunger for access to markets beyond Canton. They stare at the walls that pen them in, and dream of gunboats that could tear them down. The Kohong men grow fat on profits, their corruption whispered but tolerated, their fortunes insulating them from the law. Officials in Beijing read reports of wealth and order, never realizing that under the sheen of prosperity, resentment is fermenting like wine left too long in the sun. You walk along the Pearl River docks and see porters carrying chests of silver, so heavy their knees buckle. You watch ships unload cargoes of cotton, of clocks, of woolen cloth, all dismissed by Chinese merchants who demand only one payment, silver. You see foreign merchants pacing, tallying their losses, muttering curses at a system that bleeds them. You hear mandarins reminding them that they are barbarians, lucky to trade at all. You sense the storm building. Canton gleams, but its shine is fragile, like lacquer cracked beneath the surface. The people of the city feel it too. Fishermen see foreign sails crowding the horizon and wonder what hunger drives them. Shopkeepers watch foreigners haggle with awkward tones, their faces red with frustration, and laugh, but uneasily. Servants in the factories hear rumors of gunpowder stored in holds, of letters sent to London and Calcutta demanding change. Everyone feels the tension, though few can name it. Canton is too wealthy to last. Empires rarely leave such treasures untouched. At dawn, the city seems eternal again. The sun rises over the river, lighting sails with gold, glinting on silver coins poured into scales, reflecting on porcelain bowls stacked in crates. Junks glide past, their sails red in the morning light. The factories bustle with clerks, scribes, interpreters. Silver clinks like music. Tea leaves rustle as they are packed into chests bound for oceans. Canton looks invincible, but you can already hear the whisper of what is coming, the rustle of poppy petals in Indian fields, the hiss of smoke curling from pipes in darkened rooms. The golden age of silver is only the prelude. The poison is already on the horizon, waiting to replace silver with smoke, wealth with ruin. And so you leave Canton's crowded streets with a taste of sweetness and a breath of rot. The city glitters, the merchants grow rich, the empire believes itself supreme. But beneath it all, the tide is turning, and soon the river that carries silver will be carrying poison instead. The golden age is a mask, and masks, as history always proves, are made to be torn away. They called him Haokor in the tongues of the foreigners, but in the registers of his ancestors he is Wu Bingjian, son of a merchant clan in Canton, master of the Kohong, and by the dawn of the 19th century he is something more than a man. He is a river of silver given human shape. The British East India Company, proud ruler of India, bends politely before him. American traders, raw and eager, depend on his credit to sail home with tea in their holds. Even mandarins, cloaked in dragon robes and wielding imperial seals, think twice before crossing him, for his fortune could steady their offices or ruin them utterly. He is not emperor, not general, not scholar. He is wealth itself, incarnate. To understand how Quartz is to stand in his courtyard at dusk, lanterns glowing like fireflies in the warm Canton air. Servants move silently, carrying trays of tea brewed from leaves so fine they seem almost translucent, their fragrance delicate and intoxicating. Clerks scratch records into ledgers, their brushes whispering across paper as they record loans made to foreigners thousands of miles away. Chests of silver line storerooms like soldiers waiting for review, stacked so high the air itself smells metallic. Visitors, captains, consuls, envoys wait nervously in outer halls, their gifts clutched tightly, their petitions rehearsed again and again. To meet Haokor is to gamble your nation's fortunes on the nod of one man's head. He did not begin this way. Born into a merchant family, he inherited a place in the Kohong, the Guild of Merchants, authorized by the Qing court to deal with foreign traders in Canton. But while others treated the foreigners as nuisances, necessary barbarians to be tolerated for profit, Haokor recognized opportunity. He lent money when others hoarded it, extended credit when others demanded payment in full, and kept his accounts so scrupulously that even his enemies called him honest. Foreigners trusted him, mandarins respected him, and soon his house became the fulcrum upon which global trade tilted. The Americans were among the first to lean heavily on him. In the 1820s their young republic was hungry for tea, but their purses were thin. They borrowed from Haokor, signed contracts in his halls, shipped his loans across oceans. American cities grew fat on that trade. Fortunes in Boston and New York were written first in Haokor's ledgers. Ships bearing names like Empress of China or Haokor itself sailed with his credit underpinning their voyages. He had never seen those shores, but his silver built them. The British, too, relied on him. The East India Company's captains sat at his table, their uniforms stiff with pride, their voices strained with desperation. They came to him when their silver ran short, when their ledgers dipped into red, when the tea trade threatened to sink their balance sheets. He lent, he profited, he grew richer still. His wealth ballooned until whispers said he could buy whole navies, bribe courts, sway nations. He became, by some accounts, the richest man in the world. And yet, beneath the splendor, the rot was beginning, for even Haokor's fortune could not ignore the shadow creeping across Canton, opium. The foreigners brought it in secret, at first landing it on darkened beaches, passing it through smugglers' hands, selling it in back alleys. But soon it flooded openly, the smoke curling not just in gambling dens, but in respectable households. Soldiers smoked, scholars smoked, even officials smoked. Silver that once flowed into Haokor's coffers now flowed out again, siphoned by foreign hands, carried away on British ships bound for Calcutta. Haokor saw it. He kept his ledgers carefully, and he watched the numbers shift. The tide of silver slowed, then reversed. Profits from tea shrank even as opium revenues fattened the very foreigners he had once bankrolled. He was rich beyond imagination, but he was also trapped inside a system unraveling under his feet. He knew that his fortune was bound to the empire's veins, and those veins were filling with poison. You can almost see him, in his later years, seated in his hall, robe heavy with embroidery, fingers tracing the rim of a porcelain cup. His clerks still write, his silver still gleams, his name still carries weight in Boston and London. But outside his walls, the air smells different, sharp, smoky, tainted. Ships arrive not just with silver, but with poison bricks, stacked higher than the crates of tea leaving the docks. Officials whisper of disaster. The emperor issues edicts. Commissioner Lin begins to rise, determined to cut the trade. Hao Kwa sits quietly, watching, calculating, knowing that even his wealth cannot dam a river once it has burst its banks. He will die before the Opium War erupts in full, but his shadow lingers. His name will be remembered in American fortunes, in British contracts, in Cantonese alleys. He was the richest man in the world, but his wealth was built on a system already cracking, an empire already bleeding, a tide already turning. Silver had made him powerful, but opium was already unmaking the world he had mastered. And when the fire comes, gunboats on the river, cannons roaring, treaties signed under duress, his name will linger only as a ghost, a reminder of the moment when China seemed rich beyond ruin, when one man's fortune could balance nations, and when all of it was about to collapse into smoke. The ships come at night, their hulls heavy with crates disguised in canvas and tar, their captains glancing nervously at the horizon as they drop anchor off the coast of Canton. They do not unload in daylight, not at the official docks where silver is weighed and mandarins take notes. They slip their cargo ashore under the moon, small boats darting like shadows between the junks, hands exchanging crates for coins in whispers. Inside the crates are not silks or wool or clocks, but bricks, hard-packed and stamped, the color of dried earth, the smell faint and bitter. At first it is a trickle, a few hundred chests, smuggled in under the noses of customs officials carried inland by merchants who know the back roads. Pipes appear in taverns and gambling dens, the smoke curling in corners where gamblers hunch over dice. It spreads quickly, because opium is not just a product, it is a hunger. One pipe and a man feels lighter, pain dulled, worries softened. Another pipe and the body begins to crave more. Within months, villages see sons staggering, soldiers nodding off, farmers selling tools for another taste. What began as a luxury for the wealthy becomes an epidemic for the poor. The British East India Company smiles coldly from its offices in Calcutta. In the poppy fields of Bengal, red blossoms sway in the wind, harvested by peasants whose sweat feeds a global machine. The latex is scraped, processed, pressed into bricks, packed into crates, loaded onto ships. The company oversees it all, its ledgers recording profits that swell with each voyage. Officially, the company denies involvement. It is private traders, they insist, carrying the opium into China. But the truth is written in the fields and in the coffers of London banks. This trade is sanctioned, cultivated, encouraged. It is the answer to the silver drain, the perfect mirror to Britain's tea addiction. Silver begins to move differently now. Where once it poured into Canton, it now bleeds back out, sucked away by the hunger for opium. Families sell heirlooms, land, daughters to feed the smoke. Officials who once collected taxes in silver find the coins scarce, vanishing. The empire itself feels the ache, its treasury leaking as if a vein has been opened. And all the while, British ships wait offshore, their holds ready, their captains counting profits with every puff taken in some Canton alley. The smoke does not stay in alleys. It drifts into barracks, where soldiers should be sharpening blades, but instead lie dazed, their rifles idle at their sides. It curls into scholars' studies, where once poetry was copied, and now only silence reigns. It seeps into the courts of minor officials, who take bribes in the very substance they are supposed to ban. Corruption spreads like a shadow, officials pretending not to see, mandarins pocketing coins, the empire's spine softening as addiction worms its way into every level. Not everyone is blind. Reports flood north to Beijing, pages filled with warnings. Farmers abandoning fields, merchants ruined, silver draining, but the forbidden city is distant, its walls high, its courtyards insulated with ritual. The emperor hears but does not yet grasp the scale. He orders edicts, stern words written in calligraphy, punishments decreed. But words cannot dam a flood. Smugglers laugh at edicts, knowing that as long as there is demand, there will be supply, and as long as Britain controls the seas, the poison will keep coming. You imagine walking through Canton streets in these years. The factories still bustle, silver still clinks, crates of tea still leave the docks. But in alleyways, men huddle over pipes, eyes glazed, breath shallow. In gambling dens, smoke hangs so thick it stings the eyes. In respectable homes, fathers hide their habit behind locked doors, mothers weep as sons waste away. The empire is still vast, still proud, still golden on the surface. But beneath, it is hollowing out, its strength leaking away in curls of bitter smoke. The merchants know it. The smugglers know it. The foreigners know it. Only the emperor and his court cling to the illusion that the empire is unshaken. But you can already hear the crack in the foundation, already feel the tremor in the ground. Opium has arrived. It is no longer a trickle, it is a flood. And soon it will wash away the silver, the pride, the very strength of China's greatest empire. The emperor finally stirs. Reports pile high in the forbidden city, each one more alarming than the last. Soldiers unable to march, clerks unable to write, farmers abandoning their fields, silver leaking from treasuries like water through a cracked jar. For too long the court has relied on edicts written with beautiful brushstrokes, words drifting downward like autumn leaves, ignored before they even touch the ground. Now the rot is too obvious, too humiliating to ignore. The Son of Heaven needs a man incorruptible, a man of iron, someone who cannot be bribed with silver or softened with smoke. And so he names Lin Zexu, governor of Hunan, commissioner of the emperor's will, scourge of vice. Lin arrives in Canton like a storm. He is not flamboyant, not decorated in gaudy robes, but his presence is weight itself. His reputation precedes him, a man who does not drink, who does not smoke, who writes poetry sharp as swords and laws even sharper. His eyes cut through excuses, his words burn with righteousness. He does not see foreign merchants and smile politely as his predecessors did. He sees poisoners, he sees criminals fattened on the weakness of his people, and he vows to uproot them, no matter the cost. His first act is swift and theatrical. He summons opium smokers by the thousands, merchants, clerks, laborers, soldiers, and demands they surrender their pipes. In the open air of Canton, under the gaze of both Chinese citizens and nervous foreigners, the pipes are smashed, splintering under hammers, piled high like bones of a defeated army. Then he moves to the dens, kicking in doors, dragging addicts into daylight, forcing them into public rehabilitation. Some weep, some rage, some collapse. All are given the same choice: endure the cure or face the law's wrath. The cure is no kindness. Men are locked in barracks, their bodies trembling, sweating, retching as the drug leaves them, their cries echoing across the courtyards. It is painful, merciless, but Lin insists better pain now than death later. But he knows smashing pipes will not be enough. The true enemy is not the smoker, but the supplier, and so he turns his gaze to the foreign merchants, those pale-faced barbarians who sail their ships into Chinese waters, sell poison for silver, and laugh as the empire withers. He issues an edict: surrender all opium stocks to the Qing authorities, or face consequences too severe to imagine. The foreigners balk, bluff, delay. Lin responds with walls of soldiers, cutting off their factories, sealing them inside their golden ghetto. Armed guards stand at the gates, refusing entry or exit. Food is rationed. Letters are intercepted. The foreigners are caged like the criminals Lin believes them to be. Then comes the great moment. Over 20,000 chests of opium, each one the size of a coffin, are seized and dragged to the shore at Human. They are stacked in pyramids, a mountain of poison, enough to intoxicate millions. Workers in broad-brimmed hats break them open, spill the black paste into ditches lined with lime and salt water. The air is acrid, burning the nose, as the mass of opium dissolves into a foul black river that runs into the sea. For days the destruction continues, an execution of commerce itself, the most valuable contraband on earth, reduced to sludge. British merchants watch from a distance, their faces pale, their fortunes washing away in waves of bitter foam. For Lin it is not just enforcement, it is theatre, a message written in smoke and water: China will not be poisoned. But Lin is not satisfied with action alone. He writes letters, carefully, in elegant classical Chinese, to Queen Victoria herself. He asks how a monarch, famed for her virtue, can allow her subjects to spread poison in another land. He appeals to morality, to justice, to conscience. His brushstrokes are full of conviction. His voice, that of a man who believes righteousness is universal. The letters are translated, carried to Britain, and mocked. Parliament debates profits, not morality. Merchants count losses, not lives. The righteousness of Lin Zexu crashes like a wave against the cliffs of empire, breaking, foaming, but leaving the stone unmoved. In Canton, for a brief moment, hope flickers. Smoke lessens, silver steadies. Officials boast of a turning tide. But in London, the outrage festers. Merchants howl of losses. The East India Company seethes. Parliament fumes at the insult to British property. They do not speak of poison, only of profit. They do not see pipes smashed, only silver denied. And across the seas, in shipyards and arsenals, iron warships are prepared, cannons polished, soldiers drilled. Lin Zexu has done what no one else dared. He struck at the heart of the opium trade with courage and conviction. But courage cannot stop gunboats, and conviction cannot deflect cannon fire in destroying those chests. In writing those letters, in locking those factories, he has lit the fuse of war. The empire applauds him as a savior. The foreigners curse him as a thief. History will remember him as both. You stand on the shore at Human, watching the black water run thick with dissolved opium, the sea itself tasting bitter for miles. The workers wipe sweat from their brows. Soldiers stand stiff. Lin watches in grim silence. It feels like victory. It feels like righteousness triumphant. But if you listen beyond the waves, you can already hear another sound, distant, metallic, relentless. The pounding of steam engines, the thunder of iron hulls. The reckoning has begun. They come like a rumor made of iron. At first only whispers reach Canton. Ships with no sails, hulls black as night, engines that beat like hearts made of metal. Then the rumors become silhouettes on the horizon, low and purposeful, cutting through the Pearl River's mouth with wakes as straight as sword strokes. Junk captains stare, mouths open around curses they never finish. Fishermen pull in their nets and forget to breathe. The foreigners who have been penned inside their factories step to the balcony and allow themselves the smallest smile. The British have taken insult and turned it into steam. The river knows wood. It knows oars and poling poles, knows the slapping sound of woven sails catching a fickle wind. It does not know what to make of the Nemesis. She is not the largest warship ever built, not the most heavily armed. She is merely new, an iron steamer, shallow drafted for river mouths and shoals, armored enough to shrug off musket fire like rain on a roof. On her deck, pivot guns that swivel like watchful eyes, Congreve rockets stacked like nightmares, the quiet confidence of machinery that does not tire. She is purpose embodied, she is insult turned into strategy. Word rides up river faster than the current. Lin Zexu has destroyed 20,000 chests of opium and written to a queen across the world in the confidence of moral law. Now the answer comes in rivets and boilers. The British do not sail to debate. They come to demonstrate that in the arithmetic of empire, property outweighs principle when backed by iron. The first cannon test is not a test at all, but a statement, a shell thrown lazily against a fort's stone lip, the aftershock rolling over the water like a hand flattening silk. Men at the battery flinch, and then steady themselves because they are soldiers, and the flag behind them is the dragon's, and the river has always belonged to the emperor. But the river has always been a storyteller, and today its story changes. Chinese war junks push off in lines, their decks crowded with bristling bamboo pikes, their banners snapping with ancestral confidence. Drums beat time for oars that rise and fall in honest rhythm. Some carry cannon, bronze-bellied, beautifully cast, mouths flared like flowers. They are art as much as weapon, relics of victories on other days, under other skies. The junks close in, sails billowing, crews singing to steady nerves. On the Nemesis, no one sings. Men check fuses and vents, open and close brass cocks with small consenting squeals, and feed coal into the iron throat that never asks for sleep. When iron meets wood, belief meets physics. The first rockets leap from their racks with a hysterical corkscrew, white tails scrawling across haze before dropping screaming into clustered boats. A fan of fire blossoms where there had been song. The river, kind and patient for 1,000 years, remembers suddenly that it can drown men and accepts them without rancor. The British pivot guns punch holes as neatly as if they were demonstration shots for gentlemen on a lawn. The junks fire back, smoke booming from mouths polished by generations of hands. Round shot splashes short, or rings harmless from iron skin. Powder stink and river mud mix into a smell that will haunt the survivors' clothes for months. At the forts along the bog, cannon that once kept out pirates and petty lords open their throats. Their recoil takes men backward into stone. The British answer with shells fused to burst just within the mouth of the embrasures, turning stone lips into broken teeth. In a world of bamboo ladders and paper lanterns, shrapnel is a new language, iron vowels that lodge in timber, stone, flesh, and leave sentences of silence. Walls that have never known fear suddenly know it intimately. The gunners step back and then forward again, because stepping back too far is unthinkable. They load and fire because the ritual is older than memory. In the end, rituals cannot argue with angles. Iron steams upriver in defiance of wind, lays its hull where it pleases, and chooses its range like a man choosing a chair. Crowds gather on the banks miles away to watch smoke rise in vertical columns, as if the sky has grown chimneys. Mothers hoist children onto their hips and point at the impossible, a ship that moves against current without sail, a fort that coughs dust from every seam, a junk that burns blue-white instead of orange, as if different fire has been imported along with opium. Fishermen who can read currents like scripture find themselves illiterate before a wake that pays no attention to tide. Even the cormorants tied to fishing boats go restless, black wings opening and closing, as if time has misfired. The British officers write in neat hands each evening, recording positions and distances, charting the river with a surveyor's patience. In their letters home they tone down the smell and turn up the purpose. They speak of injured honour and unjust seizures, of teaching a lesson to a court that confused virtue with veto power. They do not mention the faces that stare from ruined parapets, the way a junk's painted eyes, the talismans on its bow, seem to weep when pitch runs. They do not mention sailors coughing river water while clutching at bellies opened by splinters. They are busy, and efficiency is its own narcotic. Canton trembles but pretends. The Kohong merchants whisper about silver locked in inland vaults, about wives sent upriver, about ledgers that now show negative space where profit used to sit. Shopkeepers keep doors open because to close is to admit panic, and panic is bad for accounts. Lin Zexu walks the ramparts and refuses to yield to despair. He orders new trenches, new barricades, new musters. He believes that a people can withstand technology by force of discipline, that quantity can bully quality back out to sea. His conviction is a lighthouse for some, and a cliff for others. The emperor's edicts fly like startled birds, each one elegant and late. The British take position after position with a calm that looks like courtesy at a distance, and like machinery up close. Where the river narrows, they steam against it. Where batteries command a bend, they pause just outside range, set their angles and erase stones in careful bites. Landings happen between tides, marines stepping through water to seize gun platforms, whose defenders have nicknames for each cannon, nicknames they do not speak again. The Chinese soldiers fight, how could they not, and fall in rows that dignify them in a way history books will never quite capture. Behind them, in towns with paper windows and shrines, smoky with daily prayers, families pack and unpack in the same hour, unable to decide whether flight is wisdom or betrayal. News outruns the British, as news always does. In villages far inland where opium pipes hang like wind chimes behind doors, men talk about iron dragons on the river, and laugh because fear and laughter share a mouth. In Beijing, the Board of War drafts orders that assume wind and tide will favor the righteous. The palace courtyards remain perfect, gravel raked into waves that never crash, pools reflecting pavilions that never burn. Eunuchs carry trays, mandarins carry metaphors, no one carries a chart of the river's new rules. The emperor is angry in an old ceremonial way. The British are angry in a new industrial way. Between those angers lies a century. The seas do not so much burn as change their meaning. Where water once separated, it now connects. A highway for steel will rather than a moat for stone hesitation. The British demonstrate that distance is an old god, and they have pledged themselves to younger ones. Steam, leverage, standardization, supply. They bombard a fort and then do the clerk's work, counting guns, cataloguing powder, entering ranges and bearings in notebooks that will outlast the bodies on both sides. Each captured battery teaches the next engagement what to expect. War is now a syllabus. One evening, the sky goes the color of vinegar, and the wind slips around corners in sudden knives. A squall climbs the river. Junks scud for shelter, their crews swearing at the sky with the ease of men who have done it all their lives. The Nemesis angles her bow a degree and a half, puts on steam like a man putting on a coat, and continues upriver with the implacable politeness of a guest who refuses to leave. In that moment, the river itself becomes a kind of tribunal. It rules that the old bargains are void. It recognizes the new license. The tide which once set the hour of prayer and the watch of night now sets only the background music. The melody is written in boilerplate. When the fighting pauses, it is only because paperwork must catch up with gunfire. Envoys meet under white flags that look, from a distance, like surrender doves. Translators chew their brushes and curse the way words float between languages, like logs between banks. The British speak of indemnities. The Chinese speak of righteousness. Both sides speak of face. Silver re-enters the conversation wearing a new hat called damages. Behind the tents where envoys practice the theatre of peace, sailors trade buttons for fruit and stare at each other's shoes. The war is small by the standards of the age. Few battles, short lists of the dead, but it changes the plot. It teaches everyone who watched that technology can be a treaty written in iron, ratified by smoke. Lin Zexu stands on a ruined bastion and does not look away. He writes to the throne with the same hand that signed the order to drown the opium. He admits losses and does not admit defeat. He uses words like rectitude in sentences that smell of powder. He still believes that a moral calculus must rule the world. The British captain who reads the translation believes with equal faith that a ledger must between them. The river slides by, silently taking reflections downstream, returning nothing but a skin of oil that will rainbow itself into memory. In the streets of Canton, children draw ships in dust with sticks and argue over whether sails or smoke are more beautiful. Mothers tell them both are dangerous and pull them indoors when thunder far downriver makes windows think of shivering. At night, the glow on the horizon has the soft pulse of a city at festival. If you do not know what you are looking at, those who know do not sleep easily. Dogs wake and bark at nothing. Priests chant longer. Merchants count slower. The burning seas do not announce themselves with mountains of flame. They declare themselves with the steady hiss of a kettle that will not stop boiling, with the soft, unstoppable clap of paddle against water, with a wake that writes a line through a century and dares anyone to erase it. When morning comes again, the iron ships are a little farther upriver. The forts are a little lower. The negotiations are a little closer to impossible. Somewhere, a chest that would have held opium now holds a family's clothing as they evacuate. Somewhere else, a ledger receives a line for cost of shells expended, and a number that looks modest beside the profit column. History does not move in leaps today. It advances as a machine advances, continuously, indifferently, until the heat in its bearings makes the air smell of metal and men step back from it without knowing why. And above it all, the gulls continue to cry like they have cried over Canton since long before silver found its way there, long before a leaf taught one empire thirst and a flower taught another how to sell it. They wheel in air that no cannon can puncture, mocking everyone with their effortless treaties with wind. If they could speak, they would say what the river already knows. Once iron has learned the way to a city, it seldom forgets it. The seas are burning in a way that leaves no ash. The smoke rises in laws and signatures rather than in soot. The water keeps its color. The age changes anyway. The dragon throne cannot disguise humiliation forever. News seeps into the forbidden city, like smoke through cracked tiles. Forts along the Pearl River silenced, junks shattered. Silver demanded not as tribute, but as ransom. Reports from Lin Zexu arrive inked in earnest strokes, his courage still unbent, his explanations edged with desperation. He insists the empire must not bow, that righteousness still weighs more than firepower. But the courtiers shuffle nervously, mandarins whisper behind screens, and eunuchs carry words no one wants to speak aloud. The emperor's decree is final: negotiate. And so the dragon bows, not with ceremony, but with signatures. On the deck of a British warship anchored off the coast, envoys sit beneath the snapping of foreign flags. The sea slaps against iron hulls as ink dries on parchment that will unravel centuries of pride. It is 1842, and the Treaty of Nanjing has been born. Its terms are carved not in compromise but in defeat. Hong Kong, the rocky island at the mouth of the Pearl, is ceded outright to Britain. A foothold carved from the dragon's body, a dagger pointed at Canton's heart. 5 ports, Canton, Shavaman, Ningbo, Fuzhou, Shanghai, are forced open, their walls no longer able to keep out barbarians. Tariffs are fixed not by the emperor, but by foreign hands. Silver must be paid as indemnity, mountains of it, as though the destruction of poison had been theft, as though Britain had been wronged by China daring to resist. The humiliation is not just in the terms, but in the ceremony. Qing envoys, dressed in silks, heavy with embroidery, sit stiff across from British officers in naval blue, the air thick with the smell of gun oil. The interpreters labor over words, every phrase a thorn. The Chinese write of agreements under duress, the British of fair treaties. Both know the truth. These are chains disguised as contracts. In Canton, news spreads faster than ink can dry. Merchants mutter behind closed shutters. Some cheer, thinking trade will flow again. Silver will return. Fortunes can be rebuilt. Others weep, seeing clearly that the gates have been torn from their hinges, that the empire's control has been broken. Hao Kui is gone now, dead before the full catastrophe. But his successors feel the shift. Their ledgers show profits written in foreign scripts. Their authority shrinks as new foreign hongs sprout like weeds. In villages inland, the people do not see treaties. They see only the aftershocks. Silver scarcer than ever, taxes heavier, fathers gone to ports to labor for foreign masters, sons lost to pipes that burn with bitter smoke. The dynasty, which once appeared eternal, now seems fragile, battered by forces it cannot command. The British, for their part, celebrate. In London, newspapers trumpet the opening of China. Merchants raise glasses to fortunes reclaimed, and politicians point to Hong Kong as a jewel of empire. They do not mention the bodies drowned in the Pearl, the addicts in Canton's alleys, the famine creeping through provinces where fields went untended. For them, victory is measured in ports and profit. The Chinese court, however, feels the humiliation like a branding iron. Officials murmur of a century of humiliation, though they do not yet know how long the shadow will stretch. The emperor dies shortly after, his successor inheriting not a throne of heaven, but one cracked by treaties, gnawed by foreign claws. Each concession feeds another demand. Each port opened becomes a wound that cannot be stitched shut. You walk now through the streets of Shanghai, one of the ports newly opened. Foreigners stride where once they were barred, their flags flying from factories, their churches sprouting spires that pierce the skyline. Chinese laborers bow their heads, carrying crates, sweeping floors, selling their strength cheaply. The city bustles with life, but it is not Chinese life. It is an uneasy hybrid, born of defeat, fueled by silver that no longer stays in China's hands. The treaty is not an ending, it is a beginning. A new kind of war has started, one fought not just with cannons but with contracts, not just with ships but with signatures. And China, for all its pride and history, has been forced to play by rules it did not write. The Middle Kingdom has been dragged to the edge of the world and shown that the world no longer revolves around it. From here, the story will not be one of recovery but of erosion. More wars will come, more treaties, more ports flung open. The dynasty will stumble from crisis to crisis, its authority chipped away until the dragon is a hollow shell. But in 1842, on the deck of a foreign ship, with the ink of the Treaty of Nanjing still drying, the truth is already clear. The tide has turned forever. You stand on that deck in your mind, the paper trembling in a humid breeze, the sound of gulls circling overhead. The sea is calm, but the empire is not. The men sign their names, the pen scratch, the treaty is sealed, and in that moment the greatest empire on earth begins its long fall into shadow. The ink dries, but the bruise keeps spreading. You step off the deck, where the Treaty of Nanjing was signed, and feel the century opening beneath your feet like a trapdoor, a long fall in slow motion. Papers travel upriver before the smell of powder has left the forts, and with them come new words for old subjugations. Extraterritoriality, most favored nation, tariff autonomy surrendered. They sound technical, harmless as clerk's jargon. They are not. They are keys hung on foreign belts, and each key opens a door inside the house of the dragon. In the treaty ports, the map redraws itself without asking permission. Along river mouths and coastlines, strips of foreign soil bloom like pale fungus. Concessions in Shanghai and Ningbo, Fuzhou and Xiamen, later Tianjin, Hankou, Jujing, Zhenjing. Streets take on new names, new laws, new clocks. A man can walk one block and cross an invisible border where Qing's officers have no authority, where a Chinese plaintiff seeking justice finds instead a consul's desk and a foreign judge with a foreign book. Mixed courts, consular courts, cases tried in languages a victim cannot speak. The word unequal is not yet printed on banners, but it already presses on the chest. You wander Shanghai as the 1840s turn to 1850s, and the city glitters like a wound. Tea chests and silk bales still move, but now opium dens multiply in alleys like shadows that learn to breathe. Along the Bund brick godowns rise beside churches, telegraph offices, banks with stone faces. Behind them lanes reek of lamp oil, salt fish, sweat, and the sweet bitter breath of the poppy. Missionaries set up schools and hospitals that heal and teach. To some they are mercy, to others spear points wrapped in scripture. Arguments that once belonged to the realm of scholars now explode in village shrines. Is the foreign god a doctrine or a doorway for soldiers? In this newest grammar of empire, charity and conquest conjugate the same. The empire sags where it should stand. Silver that once stained the fingers of tax collectors slips outward through treaty drains. The imperial maritime customs, staffed by foreigners yet charged to serve the throne, counts the coins and forwards a share, a parody of sovereignty written in ledgers. The court replies with edicts as precise and helpless as a compass in a storm. What cannot be enforced is not law. What cannot be resisted is not justice. Then the center splits. The typing rise not from foreign decks, but from China's own burning ground, carried by a private apocalypse, a failed examination candidate, convinced he is the younger brother of Christ, a promise of heaven on earth, a sword in every crowded hand. Cities fall, granaries burn, the Yangtze runs thick with the wreckage of a nation at war with itself. Between battles, opium smoke pools in barracks, where loyalty should have gathered. The Ting will not die that decade, but the price of staying alive is paid in millions of lives and in mortgaging tomorrow. Provincial strongmen, Zheng Guofan, Zhuo Zongtang, Li Hongshang, raise armies loyal first to them, then to the throne. China survives by decentralizing its will. The cure is also a quiet poison. Britain returns with France in the Second Opium War, and the script repeats with crueler penmanship. More shells, more signatures, more ports forced open. When negotiations stall, foreign troops ride past the invisible line that separates insult from vandalism and loot the summer palace, that vast encyclopedia of Chinese beauty, pavilions, bronzes, scrolls, a garden you could walk for hours and still be surprised by water and stone. They burn portions of it to the ground as reprisal and policy at once. Smoke slides over tiled roofs like a black hand smoothing silk, and a dynasty that measured itself in ritual watches a library of itself curl into ash. Objects leave China in soldiers' pockets and diplomats' trunks, and will spend a century behind glass in foreign museums, explaining to strangers what conquest looks like when it wears white gloves. Self-strengthening is born from humiliation, a slogan that sounds like resolve and tastes like compromise. Chinese learning for essence, Western learning for utility, the statesmen say, and arsenals rise at Fuzhou and Jiangnan, shipyards ring with hammers, translation bureaus grind through foreign treatises, boys with top knots learn trigonometry beside the four books. The Beiyang fleet grows fat and proud, its iron hulls and Krupp guns, a promise that the humiliation can be stopped at the waterline. But guns are chorus, not conductor. Institutions lag. Corruption keeps pace with purchase orders. Drills emulate parade more than war. When the empire meets Japan in 1894, modernized faster, organized tighter, ruthless in purpose, the Beiyang fleet dies in smoke and splinters. The Treaty of Shimonoseki slices Korea away and hands Taiwan across the strait. The carved-up melon metaphor enters the street talk, a nation as fruit on a foreign plate. Spheres of influence flower like weeds after rain. Germany digs claws into Shandong at Jiaozhou Bay. Russia reaches for the Liaodong Peninsula and a railway south to warm water. Britain absorbs the new territories beside Kowloon, add Weihai Wei to its string. France takes Guangzhou I and pads Indochina's shadow. Even Italy demands a concession and is politely ignored by fate. On maps, pastel colors nibble the coasts and rivers as if appetite could be shaded. Inland famine visits where armies have marched. Bandits become armies, and armies become bandits. Magistrates pack their seals and flee before rumor, as if rumor were weather. Everywhere you go, you hear a different register of grief. In Shandong villages, foreign surveyors plant flags and peasants whisper of rail tracks that slice dragon lines under the earth, unbalancing feng shui. In Tianjin, a foreign policeman shoves a Chinese worker and the crowd's murmur chills. In Canton, shop signs sprout foreign scripts as if words were licenses. In Shanghai's foreign gardens, a rule is posted that may never have existed exactly as memory insists, yet the memory is what matters, a general sensation that even breathing in the wrong square of ground is trespass. Facts can be corrected, humiliation seldom can. The backlash finally names itself in 1900. The boxers, fists righteous and rituals fierce, convinced that bullets will turn in air if hearts beat pure. They flood north, an elemental force of resentment and hunger, and murder missionaries and converts alike, because to them these are the visible threads of an invisible net strangling the realm. The court hesitates, then embraces the storm. The storm answers by bringing 8 nations to Beijing, artillery in tow. The capital falls under international boots. The forbidden city is entered by men whose ancestors thought it myth. Indemnities follow, some so vast, they add decimal places to pain, and their interest payments will echo in village tax quotas for years. Yet even within humiliation's ledger, there are counter-entries. Boxer indemnity funds are later rerouted to educate Chinese students abroad. Some return with blueprints for a new century. Engineers with pockets full of slide rules, jurists with codes in their heads, writers with new grammars for old rage. The late Qing reforms lurch forward, examinations abolished, ministries created, schools secularized, railways and mines, unshackled to experiment. Reform arrives late and uneven, but the direction is clear, away from incense and etiquette, toward switches and schedules. A dynasty that ruled by ancestor and text tries to pivot to timetable and budget. The floor shifts beneath its slippers. The 1911 revolution finds that floor already cracking. Wuchang mutinies. Provinces declare for the Republic like doors opening under a common wind. The child emperor's court folds its yellow robes and signs away a heaven that had already leaked into gutters. Yuan Shikai, the strongman everyone owes and fears, takes the presidency and then the throne in everything but name. He dies, and the Republic falls into warlord patchwork, armies as fiefdoms, tax offices as war chests, railways as frontiers. The humiliation does not end with the dynasty, it updates its uniforms. Students march in 1919 to protest the transfer of Shandong to Japan at Versailles, and the May 4th wind blows ink into fire. Language reforms amputate the classical sentence. Vernacular prose lets rage travel at street speed. New youth demands new citizens. Old gods step back. Parties coalesce, one speaking in the grammar of Sun Yat-sen's three principles, another borrowing Lenin's syntax. Between them lies an alley of common enemies and uncommon trust. Japan returns not as concession holder, but as invader. 1931 carves Manchuria loose into puppet theatre. 1937 sets the whole eastern seaboard on fire. The war of resistance grinds through cities and rice paddies. Nanjing becomes a noun for atrocity. Chongqing learns to breathe under sirens. Villages learn how to vanish into hills. If humiliation was once a lawyer's clause or a gunboat's silhouette, it is now a systematic curriculum taught by an army that mistakes cruelty for efficiency. The war ends only because the world ends in other places first. Civil war resumes before the smoke has thinned, and in 1949 a red flag rises over Beijing, the capital renamed for a future tense. The new state speaks a vow carved from 100 years of remembering, never again. Borders are sealed. Landlords' ledgers are thrown into public fires. Foreign concessions vanish in a bureaucratic blink that feels like exorcism. Yet the memory of what was suffered does not evaporate with the flags. It remains as policy, as posture, as the reflex behind slogans and the steel under smiles. Through it all, the first scenes keep replaying if you listen under the noise. The clink of silver taxed from peasants' palms, tea leaves shaken into a foreign cup. Opium bricks cracked open beside a brackish ditch, the iron hull nosing up river against the wind like a thought refusing to be refuted. The century we call humiliation is not a single blow but a long pressure, applied day after day by treaties, tariffs, loans, lectures, shells, sermons, debts, maps, and mistakes. It is also a curriculum, a hard, bitter schooling in how the world rearranges itself and calls it law. You finish the walk where you began, in Canton's damp light, or in Shanghai's flicker, or in the dust of Human, where the sea once tasted opium. Commissioner Lin's statue stands in several cities now, right hand outstretched, as if still ordering men to break the chests. Tourists take photos. School children tug at sleeves. The bronze eyes look past everyone toward a horizon that once delivered iron. His righteousness lost the battle, and won a place in the nation's bloodstream. Memory does that. It takes defeat and hardens it into tendon. At the end of the telling, the numbers are ledger straight, ports opened, islands ceded, indemnities counted, ships sunk, regimes collapsed. But the truer residue is tactile. The way a clerk's hand trembles when he signs for a cargo he cannot refuse. The way a mother presses a child to her chest when a whistle blows on the river at night. The way a student's voice cracks in a square as he shouts a new word for citizen, for country, for future. A century of humiliation becomes a century of vocabulary, and the modern state that steps from it does so with a scar that also functions as a compass. The Middle Kingdom no longer assumes the world orbits its throne. It remembers being forced to its knees on a foreign deck and builds fleets that speak the new grammar. It remembers contracts written with the muzzle of a gun and drafts its own with clauses hard as coin. The tea still pours, but now the trade routes are more than poems. The silver still clinks, but now it reports to banks that answer to Beijing. The opium dens are gone, and the ditch at Human is just water again. History does not return what it took, but it leaves instructions scratched on the wall. Who you were, how you fell, what you must never let happen in your house again. Listen closely, and the century does not end with a door slamming. It ends with a latch sliding into place from the inside. The room is not the same room. The house is not the same house. The lantern is still there, but no longer for moths. It burns with a steadier flame, watched by people who have learned, the hardest way, that progress without power invites predation, that righteousness without capacity invites plunder, that remembering is a form of armor. And on certain nights, when the river is quiet and the air smells of rain, you can almost hear the sea answer the shore with a different kind of rumor. Ships coming home under flags, no longer borrowed, under purposes, no longer dictated, sailing a water that remembers everything and holds grudges for no one.